He's a Cuyahoga GOP Central and Executive Committee member. He's politically active in the community. He's a constitutionalist and a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment. Recently, Charlie was a guest co-host on Strictly Speaking Unfiltered with Bob Franz during this year's NRA convention. So please welcome Charlie Kalani.
Thank you, everybody. Okay. So my name is Charlie Kalani. I'm the also known as the politically incorrect mechanic. I was asked to come and speak tonight on the Second Amendment. Hopefully, I can give you some facts about the Second Amendment and maybe even dispel some of the myths and outright lies that we're constantly fed and misled about. You are probably going to hear a lot of eye-rolling cliches from me tonight, but just remember, cliches are cliches because they're true. So let me get started here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. These words are especially sacred to me. Ratified in 1791, it is the most debated, scrutinized, and constantly attacked of the amendments in the Bill of Rights. Arguably, the Second Amendment is a civil right, as far as I'm concerned. So let's break it down. A well-regulated militia. A lot of people, especially anti-gunners, like to misconstrue this phrase. Starting with the words well-regulated. They try to say that the words imply and require firearms face regulation in the modern sense. That all government regulation against firearms is therefore constitutional. That is not what it means. It's not even close. The words well-regulated, back in the 1700s, the meaning was another way of saying functioning correctly or being in properly working order. There's also the belief that it was another way of saying regulars, and as in civilians. From what I've read and from what I understand, the word regulars actually meant standing armies, and there was definitely no trust of standing armies back in the 1700s. After a bitter war with the British, these new Americans had zero trust in standing armies. They intended for citizen militias to serve the nation's primary military defense. Which brings us to the next word, militia. Here's where the civilian aspect comes in. Militia is not another way of saying military. Sure, it sounds similar, but it is not. It was never intended to be the U.S. Army or the Marines. Both of those were established in 1775. We're 16 years beyond that point in the ratification of the Second Amendment and 15 years after the Declaration. No, the militia was always to be made up of the individual. The militia is made up of we the people, the words that started the U.S. Constitution. We the people are the militia. The Militia Act of 1792 is further evidence of the intentions of the founders. It required certain males 18 to 45 to possess multiple style firearms at the time, which would have been muskets and pistols, a minimum quantity of ammunition, and bayonets. Even some of the colonies had similar laws going back to before the Revolution was even a thought. Next we have the phrase, being necessary to the security of a free state. This portion is a little more cut and dry and less debated. It dictates that our well-regulated militia be made up of we the people. It dictates that our well-regulated militia made up of we the people is a requirement and indispensable for maintaining and protecting a society of free people from foreign threats and internal tyranny, like government abuse, crime, and civil unrest. So So when someone tells you that the Second Amendment is for hunting, remind them that deer and turkeys are not a threat to the security of a free state. Instead, this portion enables that self-defense and self-preservation are in fact core tenets of the natural born right that is the Second Amendment. Remember, tyranny is not exclusive to the government. Tyrants include anyone that acts in a manner criminal or law-breaking, or that would restrict the rights of other individuals. A free state is only as free as the people that are in it. The right of the people to bear arms, the third phrase of the Second Amendment. What I said before regarding what militia meant sounded complicated or confusing, that one would think this part would make it absolutely clear, right? The right of the people, not the government, the people. We have the right to keep and bear arms. That means all of us have the right to keep, possess, acquire, maintain, carry in public, and use arms for lawful purposes of self-defense outside of the scope of the militia, as was outlined in the Heller decision in 2008. Can you believe that over 200 years after the Second Amendment was ratified, that we had to have the Supreme Court reaffirm that possessing and using a firearm inside of our own house was a right protected by the Second Amendment? And what's even more sad about that is that was a 5-4 decision. Now, this is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to the Second Amendment. What are arms? Arms are anything that can be used for the purposes of exercising our Second Amendment right to self-preservation and fending off tyranny. Arms are not limited to guns. Arms can be knives, spears, swords, bows and arrows, a baseball bat. You want to talk about how the Second Amendment is an natural born right? Humans have been taking up arms since the first cavemen picked a rock up off the ground to bash the caveman in the next cave for fooling around with his wife. Since a sharp-pointed rock was tied to the end of a long stick, and then a shorter stick with some feathers on it, propelled by a bow. Since the first club and tomahawk were fashioned, since the Chinese shoved some black powder into a piece of bamboo and lit it, this idea of keeping and bear arms does not go back to the founding of America. It goes back to the dawn of mankind. Yet when our founders wrote and ratified the Second Amendment, they did so with the intent that we the people always be on an even playing field with the government that we put in place. This is most evident in the Federalist Papers. In Federalist 29, Alexander Hamilton argued that the best security against any standing army was a well-regulated militia comprised of everyday average citizens. In Federalist 46, James Madison surmised that even if the federal government formed the largest possible standing force, that they could easily be overcome by an armed citizenry. He pointed out the advantage of being armed, which the Americans possess over every other nation, including that the armed population forms an insurmountable barrier to tyranny. The military and the militia are used for the security of the citizens. A common myth is that the founders only envisioned flintlock muskets. In reality, those muskets were the most advanced technology of the time. Technology evolves, the right remains the same. So when someone asks me why I need that so-called assault weapon, aka semi-automatic rifle, and why I need that standard capacity magazine that holds 30 rounds, the first answer I give is none of your bleeding business, which is the most correct answer. Okay? It's not. The cop wants to know, why do you have a rifle in your backseat? What does that matter? Give me my ticket and let me go. The follow-up is that because the military has it. Usually after that, the next question I get is, oh, so you think you should have a tank? Yep. If I can afford it, and if I can afford to know how to use it, that is the original intent. That's what the original intent of the founders was. is to make sure that the citizenry and the military were always here. Not to make sure that the military was up here and we were down here. And this further backed up by, at the time, the average, privately owned warships and cannons were a thing back then. The government didn't have a monopoly on the military force at that time for the country. You could not be on an even playing field as a standing military force if you do not have access to the same equipment as them. Remember, these people just got done fighting a revolution that kicked off over gun control. The shot heard around the world was fired during the attempted confiscation of ammunition and firearms. You really think after going through all that, they wrote the Second Amendment, the idea of limiting themselves to swords and muskets while technology advanced? Does the First Amendment only pertain to printing presses and parchment paper? Does the Fourth Amendment only apply to paper files and not to your computer or cell phone? Obviously not. Now for the last part. Shall not be infringed. You would think that this was pretty direct and clear. No way could this possibly be misinterpreted, ignored, circumvented, or argued against by anyone with more than 2 brain cells that still has the ability to weight themselves. Shall not be infringed. Now, I don't think I have to explain what shall not be means, which leaves the word infringed. To be infringed is to be restricted, violated, breached, or encroached. An infringement is a violation of a rule, law, or someone's lawful legal rights. You know, like the Second Amendment under the Bill of Rights. What in God's name is confusing about this? The Second Amendment is the only amendment in the entire Constitution that explicitly states that it shall not be infringed. And it is constantly infringed upon. It is infringed upon by the federal government, state government, and where they can get away with it, municipal government. Just a couple years ago, right here in Ohio, the city of Columbus tried to pass a magazine capacity limit. Up until 2007, Cleveland forced its residents to register their firearms with the police department to create a registry. Registries are unconstitutional. They still get away with it. And you think when the city of Cleveland got overruled on that registry and got defeated in court after they sued the state of Ohio, do you think they deleted that information? I guarantee you it's up somewhere, probably way out of date by now, but they know where those guns are and they know whose door to go knock on. And the ATF, it's the same thing. The ATF during Biden, they got busted over and over again where ATF agents were doing audits on FFLs, firearms dealers, where they were going in there and they were taking photos of each page of all the Form 4473s that people would fill out to do their background check on. They were sitting there and taking photos page by page by page, and they were compiling a searchable database. And then Steve Dettelbach at the time, to try to dispel these accusations, said, we paid extra for the people at Adobe to remove the search function from the software so that we can't search it. Yeah, because nobody can go and press Control F. I mean, they think we're dumb. They think we're dumb. Do you want to open carry in Oregon, in the state of Oregon? Better stay the hell out of Portland. Can you carry concealed in Ohio? Carry concealed in Ohio and you want to drive across the country? Hope you're prepared to drive all the way around Illinois and stop before you hit California. And if you plan on driving up to the freest of states, New Hampshire, you better plan on getting a boat in Virginia with your car and being ferried because the state of New York has cut you off. Good luck driving through the state of New York. I mean, you can do it as long as you don't get pulled over. Where in the 14th Amendment does it say that you have the right to travel, but only after you disarm yourself first? Rights don't change because you crossed an imaginary line on a map. I mean, how is it that all 50 states will recognize and respect marriage or a driver's license without issue? Because I can't find those words in the Constitution. Someone tell me where the words marriage, driver's license, any of that stuff, healthcare, where's that in the Constitution? It's not. But you can have a layover in the state of New York, a layover. Never leave the airport, never touch your bags, okay? And you're lawfully transferring, following TSA regulations, a firearm in your checked bags. And if you have a magazine in there that holds more than 10 rounds, you will be arrested and charged with a felony in the state of New York. It's happened multiple times. No, the founders made it clear, shall not be infringed. Recently, under the landmark 2022 Berlin decision, it was clarified that any anti-gun laws that do not follow the plain text of the Second Amendment, history or tradition, are unconstitutional infringement. Up until that point, judges were allowed to weigh public safety on whether a law restricting the Second Amendment was constitutional or not. That's been thrown out. Now what they have to do is that it requires that all modern gun regulation be consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulation in the United States at the time of the ratification of the Constitution through a two-part test. And refreshingly, the burden of proof is on the government. Finally. The first is in the plain text. If the text of the Constitution covers the content, then it is presumptively protected. The second part is a historical analog. Does the regulation or infringement align with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation? So, for example, at the time of the founding, it was common practice to restrict firearm possession of individuals who were considered violent. Therefore, laws prohibiting violent felons from possession of firearms under this test would likely be upheld in the case of a domestic violence restraining order, and was. That was a Rahimi case. I don't like the idea that somebody can go get a restraining order against me with very little evidence and strip me of my rights, especially this one. But I get it, because it's, a domestic violence claim. It's not like you're just, calling somebody 50 times a night. But at the same time, in my view, I don't think that was right without a conviction, without any due process like that. And you won't hear the left complain about lack of due process in that case. Well, if it's involving illegals and deporting them, then all of a sudden they're all over it. Unless they're in Martha's Vineyard, then they're not worried about due process then. 24 hours, gone. Yep, I remember a lot. Conversely, as we've already seen, cases challenging having to prove justifiable need or proper cause. Also going back to these states that have may issue concealed carry permits instead of shall issue concealed carry permits. The whole may issue thing is gone. It is illegal and unconstitutional for them to force you to show cause. Like in the state of New York, you had to give a reason why you needed to conceal. You carry a lot of money, or you work in a jewelry store and you're transporting, diamonds or whatever. Same goes for the display of good character, where they were forcing residents to give them access to their social media so that they could see if you're a good person and have them give references before you were allowed to protect yourself with deadly force if you needed to. So luckily that's gone now, thanks to the Berlin decision. Other landmark cases that everybody should be educated on are the Levy decision, which I think was 2024 or 2025. 2008 Heller, which I mentioned before. McDonald, 2008 Heller, I know I touched on Heller. That's the one where the Supreme Court ruled that it is unconstitutional for you to be prohibited from possessing a firearm inside your house for the purpose of self-defense. Like I said, amazing that we actually had to have that conversation. McDonald in 2010 incorporated the Second Amendment through the 14th Due Process Clause, stating the obvious that cities and states are also constitutionally prohibited from infringing on the right to keep and bear arms. Again, I don't understand why this was, had to be talked about. The Constitution is pretty clear. Everybody's got to follow the first 10 amendments. Well, everybody's got to follow the amendments, but the 10th Amendment states that if it's not in the U.S. Constitution, then it falls to the states. So the Second Amendment's in the U.S. Constitution. Why are we talking about this? But apparently it needs to be said. 2016 Caetano case. A woman used a stun gun on a man that broke into her house and was arrested. And she had to take it all the way to the Supreme Court to get the conviction overturned.
Oh, this is dope.
Okay?
This is dope.
Isn't that striking to everyone that all these cases are in the 21st century? Isn't that amazing? Like, everything, we were fine. And then the millennium hit, and everybody's brains fell out of their head. That one established that what's called the common use test. The Supreme Court surmised that because there was something at the time of over 200 and some thousand of these stun guns in use by Americans, that was considered common use, and because it's considered common use, they're protected under the Second Amendment. Which, little side note, there are well over 200,000
where it comes
machine
in,
guns
like the soda.
still in
So they changed
circulation
it. They put it downstairs, but they
in
didn't
the
get
United
us a box.
States.
So I had to grab it
But
from down
they're still
there.
scrutinized and
You need anything else?
No, that was
restricted
it was just a
under
refill from
any
what I had
ATF
before.
regulation. You can own a machine gun still in the United States, provided that it was built before 1986 and registered before 1986. A gun is nothing more than a tool. No different than a hammer or an automobile. If I use it incorrectly or irresponsibly, I could injure or kill myself or someone else. There's no such thing as gun violence, assault weapons, or high-capacity magazines. These are made-up terms designed to sensationalize and scare weak-minded individuals incapable of thinking for themselves. Gun control kills. These are some key points that you can use the next time some fantasyland living leftist wants to argue with you. And I apologize for the redundancy. 1. The first thing every mass murdering dictator in the history of the world did was disarm the populace. From medieval peasants being prohibited from possessing swords and daggers to firearms being confiscated in Venezuela just a couple decades ago. 2. Criminals by their very nature do not follow laws. Anti-gun laws are the only laws that benefit criminals and harm the law-abiding, making them more vulnerable to criminals. Last I checked, murder was already illegal across all 50 states. Felonious assault was already illegal across all 50 states. What difference does it make the tool that is used? The overwhelming majority of those who commit crime with a gun were already barred in some way from purchasing or possessing a firearm in the first place. How many times? School shooting. Shooter was 16 years old. They're not allowed to possess a firearm. How did they acquire the firearm? Illegally. They stole it, right? Didn't belong to them. Can't belong to them. It's impossible for it to belong to them. Yet, the problem still happened. Which Brings me to my next point. Number 3, roughly 96% of mass shootings take place in so-called gun-free zones, or as I like to call them, criminal protection zones. That is why school shooters choose to shoot up schools and not police stations. The Memphis school shooter is a perfect example of this. In her manifesto, finally saw, she lamented about why she couldn't shoot up a second school instead of just the one. The other school had armed security. The one she chose to shoot up. Think about this. If I walk up to a Walgreens and a CVS, and I'm standing there, I got my shotgun, I want to go rob one of them. The one has a sign on the front door that says, no weapons allowed, pistol with a big circle and a slash in it, and the other one doesn't. Which one am I going to go pick? I'm going to go pick the one that says, hey, come in, nobody in here is armed. Free stuff, easy pickings, right? And no, this is not legal advice, but when I can, I ignore those. I'm saying you should too, but if you're doing it right, they should know you have a firearm anyways. And again, cliches, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Yes, sir. Yep.
And change the laws where people that take it don't lose it. You can go to court.
You have to commit a crime and be arrested first before you can sue the government and try to get something made.
What I'm talking about is you have a lawsuit.
Right.
You lose.
Right.
If you don't lose it.
Right.
It used to be whatever it cost, the court costs, and how much money the lawyers cost, and everything else, all that on the person that filed the lawsuit. They changed that. So anybody can go and file a lawsuit, it don't cost them shit.
Oh.
But it's the other people that have to pay, you know, to get out of trouble, but
Right.
they never got into it again.
Yep.
And this is the reason we have, just not only on guns, but on a lot of other, the standing laws can change. We did have,
We get into a court and if we live self-defense, there are some states where they cannot sue civil.
Ohio is one of those in certain
Now,
situations.
this is going to become very, very confused.
Let me get through this and then I'll do questions at the end. I promise I'm almost done. Okay, sorry. So soft targets will always be sought out by those who wish to commit the most harm, which is why I don't understand why we don't protect our children the way we do our money, politicians, and celebrities with guns. Why are our kids left defenseless? Right? Number 4, all gun permitting laws are infringement of the Second Amendment. Why do I need a permit to exercise my Second Amendment right? Do I need a permit to be Catholic or tell off a government official under my First Amendment rights? Do I need to apply for and risk being denied a certain status that protects me from warrantless searches and gives me equal protection under the law? The same goes for government waiting periods, approved firearms lists, and capacity limitations. Imagine a limit on how many attorneys I could hire for a defense team. Imagine books protected under free speech having a limit on how many pages they could have. Would it be acceptable to have a prohibition on high-capacity assault books? If it sounds stupid, it's because it is. The Second Amendment, number 5, the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting deer. The primary purpose of the possessing firearms under the Second Amendment is to resist the tyrant. Deer hunting and shooting competitions are activities to keep us proficient in dispatching the former. I do not need 30 rounds to kill a deer. I need 30 rounds when 4 scumbags break into my house in the middle of the night. Why do police officers carry pistols with a minimum of 16, 18 round capacity or more? Because every one of those bullets is an opportunity of staying alive and an extra chance of life. Why shouldn't you or your loved ones be entitled to those same chances in life? If my wife is home by herself with my kids, I want her to have as many chances in that gun as possible. Like number 6, like many other left-wing policies, attacks on firearms do more harm to those that these laws are supposedly meant to protect. Taxes levied against firearms and ammunition restrict the low income, typically living in high crime areas, from being able to protect themselves. There is a direct correlation between strict gun control and high crime. Take a look at the top 10 most dangerous cities and states, and you will find the government extremely hostile towards individual firearms ownership. Number 7, follow the 4 rules of firearm safety. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Never point a firearm at anything you aren't willing to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire it. Or as I like to say, keep your booger hook off the dang switch. Know what is beyond the target because you are responsible for every bullet that leaves the barrel. Number 8, dead rapists don't reoffend. Armed gays don't get bashed. Firearms guarantee absolute equality. When second counts, police are only minutes away. You are your own first responder. Until the criminal has to consider being killed while committing a crime, you will never see a reduction in crime. Stay vigilant, stay armed, and stay informed. Train regularly, and exercise your right to carry often. Thank you for letting me come and speak tonight.